The research base was cold, gray, and filled with silence, deep underground, far away from sunlight or sky. There was a room made of glass and metal. Inside that room, locked in a transparent cage, sat a small alien girl. She had pale blue skin, large glowing eyes, and a long white hair that looked like faded silk. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stared at the wall. As if waiting for something that would never come. Her name wasn't known to anyone. The humans called her Specimen 9. She had been found near the wreckage of a crashed alien pod 3 months ago. No other survivors were found. No translator worked with her voice. She never spoke a single word. The scientists said she had no emotion, no intelligence, just instincts. But they were wrong. She watched every person who entered the room. She remembered their faces, their patterns, their habits. Every time someone shouted, she flinched. Every time someone laughed, she looked down. She had learned what humans were like. Cold, curious, always studying but never caring. They fed her once a day, a small metal tray pushed under the cage. The food was dry, tasteless, and hard, but she ate it, quietly, slowly. Her body was thin, bones clearly showing under her skin, but she survived because she still had hope. One morning, a new officer entered the base. His name was Captain Rylan Voss. He had served in many battles, seen many aliens, and lost many friends. But nothing prepared him for what he saw in that room. He walked past the guard, entered the lab, stopped when he saw her. The girl looked up, their eyes met, and for a brief second, something changed. She didn't look like a monster or a threat. She looked like a scared child. "Is this the alien they found in the crash?" he asked. "Yes, sir," said the technician, still silent, still useless. Rylan frowned. "She looks tired. She doesn't do much." "Sir," the man shrugged. "We keep her here for observation. She's just a stray." That word echoed in Rylan's mind, stray. He had seen stray animals on ruined Earth colonies. Creatures without homes, without families, just waiting for someone to notice them. He stared at her again. And she pressed her small hand against the glass, slowly, carefully, as if afraid he might walk away. Rylan hesitated, then placed his hand on the same spot. From the other side, her eyes grew wide, and something shimmered behind them, a spark of life. That night, Rylan couldn't sleep. The memory of her face stayed with him. Her loneliness, her silence, her sadness, it all felt wrong. She wasn't just a specimen. She was alive. He went back the next day, and the next, and the next. After that, he brought her better food, soft bread, warm soup, and clean water. At first, the girl didn't move. But after a few days, she began to eat it. And she began to sit closer to the glass when he entered. Rylan spoke to her, even though she never answered. He told her stories about Earth, about space battles, about stars and planets. She listened. Her eyes always on his face. She began drawing small shapes on the glass, using her finger circles. Stars, strange symbols. Rylan realized she was trying to communicate. She wasn't dumb. She wasn't wild. She was trying. One evening, when he arrived, he found her huddled in the corner, shivering. The lab was cold, and her body was too weak to handle the temperature. He argued with the guards, but they didn't care. "She's just an alien," they said. "She's not ours to protect." But Rylan didn't listen. He brought her a blanket from his own quarters, folded it, and slipped it through the side panel. The girl looked at it, then looked at him, and slowly crawled forward. She wrapped herself in the warmth and looked up at him with soft eyes. That night, she didn't sit far away. She sat right next to the glass, her hand resting where his had been. Rylan knew what he was feeling was dangerous. He wasn't supposed to care, but he couldn't help it. She was more than a mission, more than a report. She was a child, lost and alone. And no one else saw it. Only him, But deep in the shadows of the military base, someone was watching. A scientist named Dr. Caldone had noticed the bond forming between the human and the alien. He didn't like it. To him, the girl was a rare genetic key, valuable, special, and possibly dangerous. He began planning her removal from the base. And Rylan would never see her again unless he did something, unless he chose to break the rules and protect the only soul in the galaxy who still believed in kindness. Captain Rylan stood in front of the glass again the next morning. The lights inside the lab flickered slightly, but he didn't care. His eyes were locked on her. The small alien girl with glowing eyes and a soft blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She had slept with it all night, curled up like a child who finally felt safe. When she saw Rylan, her lips moved, not into words, but into something close to a smile. It was small, barely there. But it meant everything. Rylan stepped closer and knelt in front of the glass. "Hey, Nexa," he whispered softly, testing the name he had been thinking about for days. She tilted her head, blinking slowly. "Nexa," he repeated, pointing at her. Then at his chest. Rylan, she didn't speak, but she touched the glass. A faint warmth passed through it, not from heat, but from something else. A strange energy. Rylan felt it, like a pulse, a heartbeat that didn't belong to just her. It was a bond forming, invisible, but strong. Each day he visited her and brought something new, a soft toy, a small light to keep the room from feeling cold. He even managed to sneak in a piece of music on an old datapad, soft earth melodies that made her sway slowly with her eyes closed. It was the first time Rylan saw her move freely, not in fear, not in defense, but in peace. The other officers began to whisper. They said Rylan was wasting time on a lost creature, that he had become too soft, too involved, but Rylan ignored them. Every visit made Nexa stronger, more open, more alive. She started drawing more shapes on the glass. This time, they weren't just random. There was meaning, patterns, stories. Rylan began studying the drawings after every visit. Circles within stars, strange waves that curved like maps. He believed she was telling him something not just about herself, but about where she came from. One night, she traced a shape that looked like a sun with 4 arms. When he searched the image in the database, it matched an ancient symbol found on an alien temple long ago. It was a symbol of life and legacy. Nexa wasn't just a survivor. She was a link to something much older, something forgotten. Dr. Keldon didn't miss these changes either. He noticed the way the girl responded. Only to Rylan, how her energy levels increased after every visit. Her body temperature stabilized, her healing rate improved. Keldon didn't see this as progress. He saw it as threat. He submitted a report, requesting her transfer to Off-World Lab 7, where experiments were conducted in silence, away from moral eyes. Rylan intercepted the message by accident. When he read it, his blood ran cold. They were planning to remove her in 2 days without telling him. He rushed to her cage that night, his heart pounding. She was already awake, sitting close to the glass, waiting for him. "They're going to take you away," he whispered. Pressing his hand to the glass, her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked truly afraid. She tapped the glass in a quick rhythm, pointing to the side wall, then to herself, then to him. It was a message. He was sure of it. He nodded slowly. "You want to escape?" Nexa didn't move, but her glowing fingers touched the glass again. This time, her touch was stronger. A soft hum filled the room, and a sudden vision flashed in Rylan's mind. Broken and blurry, he saw her people, tall and elegant, running through silver fields. Then fire, explosions, shadows in the sky, and then her alone in the pod, crashing, screaming, lost. When he gasped and stepped back, Nexa looked at him with tears forming in her glowing eyes. She had just shared a memory with him, without words, without sound, and it was full of pain. She had trusted him enough to open that door. Rylan clenched his fists. Breathing hard, he made a decision, one he knew couldn't be reversed. "I won't let them take you," he whispered. "I'll get you out, I swear." That night, he started planning. He memorized the guard rotations, hacked into the security logs, and used his rank to access restricted areas. It was dangerous. It could destroy his career. Maybe even get him arrested. But he didn't care, because Nexa wasn't just a mission anymore. She was someone who needed him, and he was the only one who cared enough to act. As he left the lab quietly, Nexa stood by the glass. She placed her hand on it one last time before he disappeared down the corridor. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something else, hope, and in the shadows. Far from human ears, the air shimmered briefly. The girl's energy pulsed like a heartbeat. Something inside her had awakened, and the bond she now shared with a human would be tested sooner than either of them expected. The base was quiet under the cover of night. Security drones floated down the hallways, their red lights scanning every corner. But Captain Rylan moved like a shadow, silent and focused. He wore a black jacket over his uniform and carried a small bag filled with stolen access cards, medical supplies, and food. In his mind, there was no turning back. Tonight, he would break the rules, risk everything, and set Nexa free. The escape plan wasn't perfect, but he had no choice. Nexa was going to be transferred in less than 24 hours. If he waited even a day longer, she would disappear into some hidden lab, never to be seen again. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything she had shown him. Not after the silent bond they had formed. He reached the lab door, swiped the stolen card, and waited. The light turned green with a soft beep, and the door slid open. Inside, Nexa was already awake. Sitting near the glass, she didn't look surprised. She had been waiting for him. Rylan placed a finger to his lips and whispered, "It's time." Nexa stood up slowly, her blanket wrapped tightly around her small frame. He opened the emergency access panel beside the cage and entered the override code with a click. The transparent door unlocked. For the first time in months, she stepped out of the cage. She paused, her eyes wide as she looked at the open room. Then she reached for Rylan's hand, her fingers glowing faintly. He held it tightly, his heart pounding. They moved fast, staying low in the dark hallways. The route Rylan had memorized led through the service tunnels, an old path used for maintenance that most guards ignored. But as they turned a corner, a camera spotted them. Alarms blared suddenly, echoing through the walls. "Unauthorized breach in Sector 3. The robotic voice announced. Security lights flashed red, and the chase began. "Run!" Rylan shouted, pulling Nexa behind him. She followed without hesitation, her bare feet barely making a sound. Drones zoomed down from the ceiling, scanning for heat signatures. Rylan ducked behind a crate, firing his pulse pistol to knock one. Out of the sky, sparks exploded in the air, but two more drones followed. Nexa stopped, turned, and raised her glowing hands. A pulse of soft blue light burst from her skin. The drones froze mid-air, then dropped to the ground with a crash. Rylan looked at her, stunned. "How did you do that?" Nexa didn't speak, but she looked scared of herself, as if her powers were growing and she didn't fully understand them. But there was no time to question. They kept moving. They reached the outer hangar, where an old hovercraft sat unused. Rylan had disabled the alarm system earlier, but the outer door still needed clearance. He placed his ID badge on the scanner, and the system beeped in error. "Clearance denied." "Come on," he whispered in frustration, trying again. The scanner blinked red again. Nexa stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. She placed her small hand on the metal panel, and the door hissed, then opened slowly. The entire system had responded to her touch, as if it recognized her. Rylan looked at her with shock, but also wonder. "You're more than just a survivor," he whispered. "You're connected." To something bigger, they entered the hovercraft. And Rylan started the engines. The hum of power filled the hangar as the vehicle lifted off the ground. Just then, a squad of guards burst into the room. Weapons raised, "Don't move." One of them shouted, "Stand down, Captain." But Rylan didn't stop. He turned the craft sharply and blasted through the half-open bay doors. Gunfire followed them, but the hovercraft sped into the night sky, out in the open desert. The wind howled and stars shimmered above them. Nexa sat. Beside him, gripping her seat tightly, Rylan was bleeding from a cut on his arm. But he smiled. "We made it," he said, breathing hard. "We're out." They flew for over an hour, heading into the wastelands, a zone with no signals. No tracking, no patrols. Finally, the hovercraft landed near an old canyon. Hidden from aerial scanners, Rylan collapsed on the ground, exhausted and bleeding. Nexa knelt beside him, her hands glowing again. She touched his wound gently, and a warm light flowed through his skin. The bleeding stopped, the pain faded. Rylan looked at her in awe. "You saved me again." She smiled, this time a real smile, soft and full of light. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. No words were spoken, but none were needed. They were safe, for now, in the distance. Lightning flashed over the mountains, storms were coming, and danger still followed them, but tonight, under the stars. A broken alien girl and a lonely human captain had found something rare. Not just freedom, but trust. And in that trust, a bond had formed that would soon challenge everything the galaxy believed. Asterisk, the sun rose slowly over the rocky horizon, golden. Light poured over the canyon walls, casting long shadows across the dry ground. Rylan opened his eyes, blinking at the soft warmth on his face. He sat up inside the old hovercraft, finding Nexa curled beside him, still wrapped in her blanket. Her breathing was calm, peaceful. It was the first time he had seen her truly at rest. Safe, free, and unafraid. He stepped out of the craft and looked around. They were deep inside. The wastelands, now a place long abandoned by both humans and aliens. Satellite maps showed this area as empty, uninhabited, useless, but Rylan knew better. The moment Nexa touched the hovercraft's control panel the night before, something ancient had responded. He believed it wasn't an accident. There had to be something here, something connected to her past. After a quick meal, Rylan and Nexa began walking through a narrow, rocky path. The wind howled softly, carrying dust across the trail. Nexa paused often, touching the rocks. Staring at old carvings that no human had noticed before, symbols began to appear: circles, stars, long sweeping lines etched into the stone. They were the same shapes she had drawn in the lab. She was remembering something, or being led by something unseen. After an hour of climbing, the canyon opened into a hidden valley, and there, nestled between two cliffs, was a village, not made of wood or metal, but strange silver stone that shimmered under the sunlight. It looked ancient, but still alive. Vines grew along the walls, glowing slightly with blue energy. The air was warmer, filled with a gentle hum, like the sound of wind singing through glass. Nexa stepped forward, her eyes wide, her lips parting slightly as if trying to speak. Rylan watched her reach out and place her hand on a stone pillar near the entrance. It lit up instantly, lines of glowing light spreading across the village like veins. The buildings responded, opening slowly, revealing smooth halls and glowing panels. This place wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting for her as they entered. The walls pulsed softly with light. Screens activated, showing alien symbols and faded memories. One screen displayed a group of beings like Nexa, tall, graceful, peaceful looking. They stood in Fronted the same village, smiling, hands raised toward the stars. Nexa touched the image. Her hand trembling, a single tear rolled down her cheek. This had once been her home. Rylan stepped beside her. Placing a hand on her shoulder, "You were never just a specimen," he said softly. "You belong to something beautiful." She nodded slowly, the first clear sign she fully understood him. That night, they camped inside one of the buildings. A round room with soft lights that adjusted to their presence. Rylan examined old alien tools, books made of light, and strange crystals stored in cabinets. The builders, Nexus people, had once lived here in harmony. Their technology wasn't built for war, it was built for life, healing and memory. But something had hunted them, destroyed them, and chased Nexa across the stars. Now she was all that remained. The next morning, Rylan discovered a control room buried under the central dome. The system responded only to Nexa's touch. She placed her hands on a panel, and a hidden archive activated. Images flooded the room, stars, planets, voices in languages no human had ever heard. Then, the images changed, showing fire, explosions, and a dark fleet moving across the stars. The hunters, Rylan guessed, a violent alien race that wiped out the builders for reasons unknown. And now, if they discovered Nexa was alive, they would come again. "We have to warn someone," Rylan said. "Someone who can help protect you." But Nexa shook her head. She drew a symbol on the floor, a spiral turning inward. It meant hidden, safe, not yet. She didn't want to be found, not until she was ready. Rylan understood. But he also knew they couldn't hide forever. If Dr. Calden had tracked their path, soldiers could be searching even now. He began reinforcing the village entrance with old metal sheets and hidden cameras. He taught Nexa how to trigger alarms, how to escape quickly. She learned fast, smarter than any child he had ever met, and yet, every night, she sat beside him, listening to his voice as he told her Earth stories. Her favorite was about the stars over the oceans. She had never seen an ocean, but the way she smiled when he spoke of it made his heart ache. Days passed quietly, and Nexa began to change. She stood taller, walked with more strength, and started making sounds, soft clicks, and hums that echoed through the halls. The village responded to her voice, recognizing the air of the builders. She wasn't just a survivor now. She was a leader, slowly awakening. One evening, as the sky turned purple, a strange noise echoed through the canyon. A deep mechanical hum followed by distant thunder. Rylan stepped outside and narrowed his eyes at the horizon. A dark shape floated in the distance, a dropship. Heading their way, his heart sank. "They found us," he whispered, hand reaching for his weapon. Behind him, Nexa stood silently, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. She wasn't afraid, she was ready. The sound grew louder with every passing minute, a low, rumbling vibration that shook the canyon walls and made the ground tremble beneath Rylan's boots. He stood at the entrance of the hidden village, eyes locked on the sky. The dropship was close now, large, dark, and built for battle. It moved like a predator, slow and steady, as if it already knew where its prey was hiding. Behind him, Nexa stood still, her hands clenched, her glow pulsing slightly. She wasn't trembling, she wasn't crying. She was focused, her eyes sharp, like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. Rylan looked at her and nodded. "It's him, isn't it?" he asked quietly. She didn't speak, but she gave a slow, painful nod. The ship landed with a heavy thud at the edge of the canyon. Dust filled the air as the loading ramp opened. From the shadows stepped a tall figure, armored in black metal. He was not human, not builder, but something in between. His skin was gray and rough like stone, his eyes glowing red behind a thick helmet. He carried a heavy blade across his back, and his presence made the air feel heavier. His name was Kargan, a mercenary hired by those who feared Nex's kind. He had hunted the builders across galaxies. And now only one remained. He smiled when he saw her standing behind Rylon. "So this is the last spark of your dead race." He growled, his voice like metal grinding stone. "You should have stayed in your cage." Girl Rylon stepped in front of Nexa, gun raised. "She's not going with you," he said firmly. Kargan laughed, the sound echoing through the canyon like a drum. "A human protector." "How touching," he sneered. "Step aside, Captain, and I might let you live." "No," Rylon said, his voice steady. "You'll have to go through me." Kargan's smile faded. "Very well," he said, pulling the massive blade from his. Back with one hand, "Let's see what makes you so special to her." He charged forward. His movements fast and brutal. Rylon fired twice, the blasts bouncing off Kargan's armor. He rolled to the side, dodging the blade as it crashed into the ground, breaking the stone beneath. Nexa watched, frozen, her hands shaking with light. She wanted to help, but something inside her was holding back fear. Pain, memory. Kargan swung again, and Rylon blocked with a metal pipe, the impact sending him flying into the wall. Blood dripped from his forehead, but he stood again, limping slightly. "Nexa, run," he shouted. "Get out of here." But Nexa didn't move. She stared at Rylon, the man who had given her warmth, food, freedom, and kindness. He had protected her without asking anything in return, and now he was going to die for her. Her heart pounded in her chest, glowing brighter with every beat. Then something snapped inside her. She screamed, a sound full of pain and power. Light exploded from her body, sending a shockwave across the village. Kargan stumbled back, shielding his eyes. Rylon dropped his weapon, stunned by the energy in the air. The village responded, walls lighting up, old machines powering on, ancient symbols glowing everywhere. Nexa floated slightly off the ground, her eyes glowing pure white now. She raised her hand, and the air around her shimmered, a wave of force shot out, striking Kargan and slamming him into a wall. He roared in rage, struggling to stand. "You think that scares me?" he shouted, but Nexa stepped forward, no longer the frightened child in a cage. She was something else now, a builder awakened. She extended both hands, and vines from the village moved on their own, glowing and wrapping around Kargan like chains. He struggled, cursing in alien tongues, but the vines held strong. Rylon stood up slowly, limping toward her. "Nexa," he whispered, "stop. You don't have to kill him." Her breathing slowed, her glow dimming just slightly. She looked at Rylon, then back at Kargan. He was helpless now, trapped by the very world he came to destroy. With one last look of pain, she closed her hands, and the vines tightened, pulling him into the ground, not to kill, but to trap, deep below, where he could never escape again. Silence followed, heavy and sacred. Rylon reached her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She turned to him, eyes filled with tears. "I remember," she whispered in a voice soft like wind. Rylon's eyes widened. "You spoke." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I remember everything now," she said. "My people, our fall, and you." Rylon smiled weakly, wiping blood from his face. "You saved me." She looked at him, then gently hugged him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. "You saved me first," she said, her voice trembling. "Now we save each other." As the stars appeared overhead, the village lit up fully for the first time in centuries. The air of the builders had awakened, and beside her stood a human, her protector, her family, her bond to the new world they would soon rebuild together. The night sky above the village glowed brighter than usual. The stars twinkled like silent watchers, ancient and patient. Rylon sat beside a small fire, holding his bruised side. His wounds were healing, thanks to Nexa's touch. But his heart was heavier than ever. The fight with Kargan had shaken him, not because of pain, but because of what it revealed. Nexa was more than he ever imagined. She was sitting alone now, her back against one of the glowing stone walls. Her eyes were fixed on the central dome at the heart of the village. The light from the ancient symbols pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Nexa looked calm, but Rylan could feel the weight in her silence. She had remembered something big, and she hadn't spoken much since. Nexa, Rylan called gently. "What did you mean when you said you remember everything?" She turned her head slowly, her voice quiet but clear. "I am not just the last of my kind," she said. "I am the daughter of the High Builder." Rylan blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The High Builder. He repeated. Nexa nodded. Standing up slowly, she walked toward the dome, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. "Come," she whispered. "You need to see inside." The air was warmer, the walls higher, and everything pulsed with deep blue light. At the center stood a crystal pillar surrounded by rings of floating metal. Nexa placed her hand on it, and the rings began to spin slowly. A holographic display appeared, showing a glowing star map, thousands of planets, stars, and symbols. "Connected by thin lines, this is what the builders created," she said. "A network of peace. Of light, of life." Rylan stared at the map in awe. It stretched across the galaxy and beyond. He had heard stories. Rumors of an ancient civilization that once helped other species grow, but he had never believed they were real. Now he stood beside their last heir. "We were not warriors," Nexa continued, her voice soft but firm. "We healed the sick, we taught, we protected those who couldn't protect themselves. But then they came." The star map shifted, turning red as dark shapes spread across it like ink. "The hunters," Rylan whispered. "Yes," Nexa replied. "They destroyed the network, hunted us planet by planet. My father hid me in a cryopod and launched me into space. I was supposed to wake when it was safe, but the signal never came." She looked down, sadness in her eyes. "I wandered for years, unconscious, until I crashed near your base. You were the first living soul I saw when I opened my eyes. You were the first to care." Rylan stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said. "We'll protect what's left." The pillar glowed brighter at his words. The map zoomed in. On a planet, not Earth, not the Builder homeworld, but something else. A beacon began blinking, slow and steady. "What is that?" Rylan asked. Nexa touched the glowing symbol, and a new image appeared. It showed survivors, other beings with Builder features, living and hiding on distant worlds. Some were wounded, some scattered, but they were alive. They heard the villages. "Energy pulse," she said, her eyes lighting up. "The signal is reaching them, calling them home." Rylan's heart lifted. "You're not alone anymore," he said, smiling. Nexa nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "But they're not safe," she added quickly. "If they come here, the hunters will come too." He looked at her, his mind working fast. "We'll prepare," he said. "We have the village, the tech, and we can call for help from Earth." But Nexa shook her head. "No Earth armies," she whispered. "They will see this as a weapon. They will try to control it. Only those with true hearts must come." Rylan understood this wasn't about power. It was about trust, unity, and purpose. He stepped toward the panel and placed his hand beside hers. Together, they activated the full beacon, a pillar of light shooting into the sky above the canyon. It pulsed in every direction, a message of peace, of return, of warning, far across the galaxy. Hidden ships turned, old signals activated. Others like Nexa, hiding in fear for generations, looked up at the sky and wept. The bloodline of the Builders was calling them back, but deep in the black corners of space. Another signal responded, one not of peace, but of hunger. The hunters felt the pulse too, and they would come, stronger than before. Back in the village, Rylan stood beside Nexa as the stars above shimmered like never before. "We've started something," he said. Nexa looked at him, then at the glowing sky. "Yes," she whispered, "a beginning." And a final stand? Asterisk. The skies above the hidden village were no longer silent. Lights moved across the stars, not just stars themselves, but ships. Some came quietly, slowly, cautiously. Others came in streaks of blue and silver, drawn by the ancient beacon that pulsed from the heart of the Builder ruins. Nexa stood at the edge of the cliff, her glowing eyes filled with both fear and hope. They were arriving, just as the beacon had promised. But so was something else. Rylan stood beside her, armored and ready over the last few days. They had prepared the village. Alien shields had been restored, the walls reinforced with both builder tech and human engineering. Defensive drones floated silently above the rooftops, waiting, but Rylan knew it wouldn't be enough. He wasn't a soldier protecting a base anymore. He was defending something much more precious. A child, a race, a future. The first to arrive were the survivors. A tall woman with silver eyes, a child with skin like crystal, a pair of twins who moved in perfect sync. They looked at Nexa with awe. Bowing slightly as they approached, "You carry the flame," the woman said softly. "We are yours to guide, Nexa." Didn't speak right away. She reached out, gently touching the woman's hand. Energy passed between them. Recognition, pain, shared memory. "We are one now," Nexa said, her voice steady. No more hiding. But peace didn't last long. On the fifth night, under a red moon, the air turned cold. The ground began to shake, and deep vibrations filled the earth. Rylan rushed to the central tower and activated the scanner. His breath caught in his throat. 3 massive hunter warships were descending from orbit. There. "Signal loud and angry. They found us," he said quietly. "And this time, they brought an army." Nexa called the survivors together. Many were afraid. Some wanted to flee, but she stood tall at the heart of the village, her voice clear. "They came before, and we ran," she said. "They hunted us, broke us, and buried our names. But today, we stand. Today, we fight. The builders who once knew only peace prepared for battle." Rylan taught them how to fire weapons, how to set traps, how to hold ground, and in return, they taught him how to use builder energy to shield, to heal, to protect. Nexa moved among them like light itself, not just a girl now, but a leader. A symbol, she wore robes made from ancient threads. Glowing softly at her side, Rylan stood like a soldier from a forgotten time. When the hunter ships descended, the sky burned. Dark metal creatures poured from the clouds, growling, stomping, firing without mercy. But they met resistance like never before. The village came alive, drones flying, walls shielding, light pulsing from every stone. And at the center of it all, Nexa stood on the tower's highest point, arms raised, calling on the ancient power within her blood. Rylan led a team on the ground, defending the eastern gate. He moved fast despite his wounds, firing and commanding. At one point, a hunter broke through, charging toward Nexa's tower. But Rylan threw himself in front. Taking the full hit, he collapsed, bleeding, his vision darkening. But before he lost consciousness, he saw Nexa scream again, this time not in fear, but in fury. Her power exploded outward. A sphere of pure light sweeping across the battlefield, hunters dropped where they stood. Frozen or shattered, the warships above tried to flee, but the beacon turned into a weapon of light. One by one, they fell, crashing into the canyons below. The ground shook, and then silence returned. When Rylan woke up, the battle was over. He was lying on a bed of soft energy, his wounds healed, Beside him, Nexa sat, holding his hand, her face tired but smiling. "You did it?" he whispered. "No," she replied. "We did it." Weeks passed, and the village became more than just a shelter. It became a city, then a sanctuary. More survivors arrived, not just builders, but peaceful species once helped by them. The legend of Nexa and the human who saved her began to spread across stars and systems. They called her the Last Light and him the Flame Bearer. One morning, Ryland stood on the same cliff where it all began. Nexa stood beside him, a little taller. Now, her steps more confident. She looked at him with soft eyes and asked, "Do you ever miss Earth?" He smiled and shook his head. "Earth never felt like home," he said, "but this place, with you, does." She reached out and took his hand. The sun rose over the valley, shining on a new world. A world not of fear, but of hope. A world rebuilt by those once broken, led by a girl once caged, and the man who saw her heart when no one else did. Together, they watched the stars, and in that quiet moment, they knew the war was over, but their story was just beginning.